The M1 Pro 14-inch MacBook Pro has been my main laptop since it launched last October. And since then, I've edited many YouTube videos on it, taken it through multiple trips across the entire country, and had a ton of time to reflect on my life with this machine. It's been my go-to machine to get all my YouTube-related work done. So today, we're going to talk about how the body of the machine has held up, its impact on my user experience, and well, if it's a purchase that I would make again today. Let's get started with a longer-term review. This video is sponsored by NordPass. First, let's talk about how the laptop has held up. Apple laptops are usually known for their sturdy feeling aluminum build, unless you had the old white MacBooks that were plastic and would yellow over time like a white Nintendo DS Lite. Ugh, nasty. But with that metal body comes issues of its own, and that means chipping. Here's a 2020 MacBook Air. The lid got slightly chipped up, and the bottom right corner of the body is slowly being chipped by someone wearing a metal bracelet, a metal watch, or a metal watch buckle. And that's normal for MacBooks, so just be aware that this sort of thing can happen often, especially if you wear stuff on your wrist. For my own 14-inch MacBook Pro, I don't see any signs of those yet. The body has held up pretty well, and I'm not the most destructive person with my laptop. I don't wear much on my wrists, and I tend to baby my laptops, but even so, this laptop has been tossed around frantically in the middle of TSA security checkpoints at the airport. It's been stepped on by my medium-sized dog who doesn't understand the meaning of personal space, and well, it's dealt with being bumped into here and there. And the body is somehow still well intact. The hinge still works as intended, and all of the ports still function as if they did on day one of owning this machine. I can't say the same about the M1 MacBook Air I had before this. At the 6-month mark, one of the USB-C ports was not reliably working or charging anymore. There's also starting to be signs of fingerprint oils appearing on the keyboard, and dust is building up near the vents of the laptop. I don't think dust buildup will be a significant issue with this laptop, because during light usage, the fans are basically silent and really only become audible when you're really pushing it. Even then though, it's not loud, just audible. But you can remove the bottom plate to clean out the fans if you absolutely need to. You just might need special screwdrivers to remove these screws. All right, now let's talk about user experience. I replaced an M1 MacBook Air, which in my opinion is already a really good machine, for this 14-inch M1 Pro MacBook Pro, which takes everything I loved about the M1 MacBook Air, then literally doubled all of it, including the price. The display is fantastic. The 120 Hz refresh rate makes scrolling and general usage feel butter smooth. Okay, yeah, the notch on the top of the display does still exist, but in the real world, it just kind of fades into the background of what you're doing. 95% of the time anyway. Battery life will last you at least a day or more, and since I got the cheapest model, 14-inch MacBook Pro, I also got the cheaper 67-watt power adapter. And this thing, while it isn't the fastest one you can get, it charges fast enough. And since this is a laptop with USB Type-C, you don't have to use MagSafe. MagSafe is the better way to charge your device, but you can really charge it with any USB-C charger, even super slow ones. And the mini LED display is really nice to look at, and in day-to-day mixed usage, you don't really notice any kind of blooming you see with a mini LED, unless you're really looking for it while you're sitting in a dark room. The speakers still put most other non-MacBook laptop speakers to shame. I tried, but I can't really find anything within my own use cases that makes this machine struggle. Take this 4K video timeline I'm working on here. Playback of everything is super smooth, even while screen recording like I am right here. I don't really see dropped frames or any timeline stuttering. Rendering times in Final Cut Pro are also super fast. Even stabilization, which used to take forever on my older Intel MacBooks, is cut up like fine sushi in a matter of seconds. Having multiple 4K displays plugged in and dozens of tabs open are no struggle for the MacBook Pro. And editing 24 megapixel photos in Affinity Photo always goes without a hitch. So from a content creator's viewpoint, this machine feels almost perfect. But that doesn't mean there aren't things that this MacBook Pro isn't great at. And some things outside of content creation, it doesn't do as well. But before we talk about that, let's talk about today's sponsor, NordPass. Remembering a bunch of passwords to the hundreds and hundreds of websites you use in your life is a huge pain in the butt. It feels like every website requires an account these days. What's the password to my Google account, my Netflix account, my LinkedIn account? It doesn't matter. With NordPass, you can store all your passwords in a single place, generate secure passwords for new sites, and automatically fill out the necessary login information on websites so that you don't have to waste extraneous finger movements having to type it all out. There are a bunch of straight up weirdos and nefarious people out there on the internet that will try to make their way into your accounts, like they did to my Hotmail account I made when I was 10 years old. My bad, I didn't know any better. With NordPass, it will let you know if there's been a data breach to the hundreds of websites you access, where it happened, and the type of data that could have been compromised. And if you use weak passwords like password, then NordPass will tell you, hey, maybe you need to change that up. That's a weak password. Honestly, making sure you stay safe on the internet is important, and a password manager like NordPass helps in that goal. If you're interested, check out the video description or the pinned comment below and use offer code JimmyTriesWorld with no spaces to get 50% off a 2-year premium membership. Anyway, back to the video. It's been about 1.5 years since Apple transitioned from Intel CPUs to using their ARM-based Apple Silicon chips. And well, a large majority of popular apps are now Apple Silicon optimized, meaning a lot of these app publishers are taking their apps, making sure that they're written correctly for this architecture to maximize performance and compatibility. For the most part, you won't really have to worry there. Most major apps are now M1 optimized or run perfectly fine through Rosetta. That being said, this change has also limited the functionality and performance of the M1 Pro MacBook Pro and all Apple Silicon machines in some way. The first is that you can no longer natively run Windows through Boot Camp, but you can run Windows through virtual machines with software like Parallels, but you'd still have to emulate x86 apps, meaning you'll get a pretty decent hit on performance. And the second is that gaming on the Mac, to this day, I feel like I say this in every review, is not ideal on the Mac, with most games either written for the old Intel Macs or just straight up not supported. And while you can download iOS games and apps on Apple Silicon Macs, these aren't optimized for mice and pointers. I'm not saying gaming is impossible. When you do find a popular game that works, the MacBook Pro is serviceable with the right expectations. So as long as your usage of the machine doesn't delve into heavy workflows that require Windows and gaming, it does fantastic. But if you do use your machine for gaming or need to heavily rely on Windows or Windows-based apps, this isn't the best machine for that, honestly. And the ports. Who can forget about the ports? The cheaper MacBook Air and 13-inch MacBook Pro only have 2 USB-C ports, and because of that, the workloads that require a ton of external devices are difficult to execute on those machines. I mean, one port is usually already taken up by a charging cable, and then you only have one other slot open. When I'm doing stuff related to YouTube, this could be like editing YouTube videos, answering emails, drafting up scripts that require some research, or all of those things at once. I need the extra ports. An external SSD to work off of, an SD card for ingesting footage, another external SSD from the external video recorder, a multi-gig Ethernet connection to back up footage to the NAS, an external monitor. Don't forget, you gotta charge the laptop during all of this too. It'd be kind of bad if it dies while working. The ports can fill up, and the ports can fill up really, really fast. On the 14-inch MacBook Pro, I'm able to just forget about all the little dingle dongles altogether and know that I'll have all my needs covered or with minimal swapping. Also, it's a lot cleaner and wears down the ports less when you don't have a million things dangling off a dongle, putting pressure on the ports. Okay, so what are the alternatives to the 14-inch MacBook Pro today? Well, the alternatives I can think of that people would be interested in are light notebooks of roughly 13 to 15-inch screen sizes. This would be like a Dell XPS 15, a Surface Laptop Studio, and even Apple's own 13-inch MacBook Pros and 16-inch MacBook Pro, especially for those who only want to look in Apple's ecosystem. When you look on the Windows side, I think the MacBook Pro is pretty competitive with their Windows alternatives. Spec for spec, it trades blows here and there, and that's not something you could have said for previous generations of this machine. As for Apple's own MacBooks, I've said this before, I think Apple's M1 MacBook Air is their best value machine in their lineup by far. In terms of what you're getting for how much you're paying, that machine should not be underestimated. It's so good. Even if that is the best value, I get that for some people there's a need for more power or longevity. What I've noticed in my own life is that there are generally 3 major types of people who buy MacBook Pros. Of course, this is not an all-inclusive list. There are so many types of people of all walks of life that buy these things. The ones I've noticed the most are these 3 types of people. People who use them for creative work, like the photographers and videographers of the world, and then there's software developers or people who like to keep their laptops for 5 to 8 years, so they buy the nicest one, hoping it will perform until their next upgrade. And if you fall into any of these categories, I honestly think this laptop will serve you well. Okay, so I guess it's conclusion time. Normally 6 months in, I'm done with the honeymoon phase with the product. By then, all the flaws start to rear their ugly head, and then the realization kicks in that I spent $2,000 on this laptop. But with the 14-inch MacBook Pro, it's kind of hard to look you in the eye and say owning this machine has been a pain, because it's been nothing but fantastic. It has long battery life that's still going strong, all the different ports are back, and I know $2,000 is a lot to spend on a laptop, especially one that to this day is in high demand and takes time to ship when you can just go buy a different machine. The display is nice to look at. The build of the machine feels nice in the hand. And in my day-to-day workflow, I can't find anything that I use it for that really causes the MacBook Pro to struggle. It will handle 95% of people's workloads just fine. I kept thinking that I'd end up changing laptops every 2 to 3 years, since my video editing needs keep growing every year. With upgrades to crazier cameras, my laptop would need to keep up, right? But this machine is changing my perspective, and I might just be using it longer than that. I don't want to ever call a laptop perfect, but it's hard to find a laptop that excels in so many different categories. The display makes it great for media consumption. The speakers sound good. The battery life is great. The performance is great. It rarely gets loud and rarely gets hot. Now, $2,000, like I keep saying, is a lot to spend. Like, I was at first hesitant, but if you're looking for one of the best all-around laptops out there, I'd still look right here. I honestly think this might be one of Apple's best laptops that they've made in years. Anyway, what do you personally think? Are you considering this machine? What other laptops are you looking at? Are you just watching an endless number of MacBook Pro videos because you're waiting 2 months for your MacBook to get here? What other laptop catches your eye right now? Leave all that in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and well, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Bye.